On this Monday night, confusion over new travel rules.
What do we do?
The need to clear the air and why some international passengers didn't have to quarantine at a hotel today. The shot of optimism in Nova Scotia.
It's nothing to it, it's just a little prick in the arm.
Plus, when Canada will receive its largest delivery of the vaccine. Overworked and underpaid.
It's tiring sometimes. You're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
The broken system of caring for critical infrastructure in First Nations communities. And stunning new sights and sounds from Mars.
The parachute has deployed.
A front row seat as Perseverance plummets to the red planet.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with news about vaccines and what could be a pivotal week. The Public Health Agency of Canada says the largest delivery of vaccines is on the way. Planes carrying the precious cargo began arriving in Canada early this morning. More than 600,000 doses are expected to arrive this week. The majority, over 475,000 doses, are coming from Pfizer-BioNTech. Another 168,000 are being shipped from Moderna. At the same time, new rules are in effect for anyone entering Canada for non-essential reasons. They must show proof of a negative COVID test done in the last 72 hours. And now at land borders, self-swab COVID-19 test kits are being handed out at all 117 points of entry. On-site COVID-19 testing is being provided at 5 high-volume border points. The plan is to expand that to 16 sites by March 4th. A 2-week quarantine is still mandatory, and a second test is required on day 10. Travelers coming in by air will also be tested on arrival and must quarantine at a government-designated hotel for 3 days at their own expense. It sounds like a simple plan, but the devil is in the details. Robin Gill has our top story tonight.
There are 10 to 15 international flights landing at Vancouver International Airport daily. These passengers arriving from China early Monday were told they didn't have to check into a quarantine hotel.
Not to hotel.
That's because the new rules kicked in after they were already in the air.
And your registration number.
The federal government's handout gives the impression the new travel rules are seamless, but travelers can't book directly with approved hotels. They have to go through the federal government's 1-800 line and rely on civil servants to make the reservations. Bilal Galiini, who's been working in Paris, is preparing to come back to Montreal. He spent hours calling with no luck.
What do we do? Does it mean that we are not allowed to travel back to Canada?
The BC Centre for Disease Control keeps track of travel exposures. There are more COVID-19 exposures on domestic flights compared to international arrivals. But the more transmissible variants are the variable here.
This doesn't account for that many cases, all things considered, but we do want to limit the entry of new variants. Up until now, the new variants have come from other countries.
Upon further investigation, Galiini saw that he can't book until 2 days in advance, and his flight isn't until March. Still, he thought he was doing due diligence.
You have only also a finite number of rooms available. So suppose you call 48 hours in advance only, and you want to book your hotel. Suppose you get through to someone who will guarantee you that you have rooms available.
It seems the new travel rules have added another layer of pandemonium and panic in this pandemic.
If we are not ready, we should figure out how to get ready as quickly as possible and have an alternate plan that is not leaving it to the passengers themselves to just decide to do the right thing and self-isolate.
Even after the 3 days at the hotel, travelers still must self-isolate at home for another 11 days. That's if there's a negative test. But if there's a positive one, they have to move on to a government-approved facility and quarantine. Donna?
Robin Gill at Vancouver International Airport. Thanks. In British Columbia, the Teachers Union is calling for immediate action to prevent the spread of new variants in schools and potentially into the homes of students and staff. The BC Teachers Federation wants masks made mandatory in all classes, including elementary schools, and wants increased rapid testing when variants appear in schools. The BC government says existing recommendations are working and transmission in schools remains low. At least 7 schools in the Metro Vancouver area have now reported exposures to the highly transmissible variant first detected in the UK UK. Those schools have remained open, and close contacts of the infected individuals have been told to self-isolate and get tested. In Quebec, 4 schools have closed as a precaution because cases of the variants are suspected but not confirmed. Testing there is underway. Across Canada, more than 800 cases of COVID-19 variants have now been confirmed. The majority involve the B117, the UK variant. Every country is trying to work out how to handle these variants. Today, Prime Minister Boris Johnson laid out his plan to cautiously ease his country out of a nationwide lockdown.
We're now travelling on a one-way road to freedom.
The plan is to reopen in 4 phases in the UK starting March 8th, with the reopening of schools. Dates to lift other restrictions are not set in stone, and all the legal limits on social gatherings and contacts will be lifted no earlier than June 21st. Johnson says the decisions will be determined by data, not dates. The data out of the U.S. today is grim. 500,000 Americans have now died from COVID-19. That is the number of confirmed deaths. The real number could be even higher. Few American presidents understand loss the way President Joe Biden does, and tonight he joined the nation in mourning.
This nation will smile again. This nation will know sunny days again. This nation will know joy again. And as we do, we'll remember each person we've lost, the lives they lived, the loved ones they left behind. We will get through this, I promise you.
Biden led a moment of silence for what he called a heartbreaking loss of life. It is the highest death toll of any country in the world. Many of those who died took their last breath alone. Biden said the world cannot become numb to the sorrow. As Jackson Proskow reports, families across the country are grieving.
From the moment they met until the moment they died, Manuel and Sally Montano were together. They succumbed to the virus on the same day, in the same hospital room, after spending their 50th anniversary side by side on ventilators.
It's difficult to lose one of your parents, let alone both of them. It's devastating. Nobody was ever prepared for that.
COVID has shattered lives in every corner of the U.S. Detroit bus driver Jason Hargrove, New York nurse Caius Kelly, new mom Erica Becerra, just 33 years old.
She gave birth to her son, but didn't get to hold him. Because right after she gave birth, that's when they put the tube in.
The first death in the U.S. was just over 1 year ago. Half of all deaths since then, 250,000, have occurred in just the past 3 months.
This is the equivalent of the city of Atlanta in terms of deaths, and in a year's time.
The failures began with the Trump administration, which shunned science and sowed mistrust about public health measures, all without a national plan. Yet for the first time in the pandemic, there are signs of optimism.
I don't think it's inevitable that we will have a surge, but we need to be prepared.
There's hope that new, more contagious variants may not take hold. Cases and deaths have fallen sharply, and the U.S. has already administered more vaccinations than any other nation. 63 million doses to date, at a rate nearly 5 times faster than Canada.
We should be getting more and more vaccines into arms as quickly as possible, because the more people that are vaccinated, the less damage these variants can do.
No matter how or when it all ends, hundreds of thousands of families will be forever scarred by loss, as the virus exacts a higher toll in the U.S. than in any other country on Earth. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Allegations against Canada's former top soldier are back in the spotlight. In Ottawa, the House of Commons Defence Committee met to look into what the government did and did not know about allegations of sexual misconduct against former Chief of the Defence Staff, General Jonathan Vance. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is continuing to follow this story for us. Mercedes, what happened today?
Donna, the government is grappling with how to handle an investigation that senior sources call unprecedented in scope and seriousness. After Major Kelly Brennan's interview with Global News, the probe won't just look at the allegations against General John Vance, but also who was complicit and barriers the women face to coming forward. And a new concern that sexual misconduct may be a larger issue at the senior ranks of the Canadian Forces. Major Brennan explained the problem with powerful officers having relationships with their subordinates, as she related how she says she felt with General Vance.
Was I participating in it? Yes. Could I say no to him? No. And the reason why I say that is because if he rang me on the phone or if he texted me, I was obliged to get back to him.
While the terms of reference for the external investigation are still being developed, there are few ways that an investigation this extensive and this sensitive can be handled. Either a large human resources firm or a prominent Canadian, like a former Supreme Court justice, according to one source who is familiar with the file. Military police said that they can't comment on ongoing investigations after Major Brennan said she was violently attacked by a member of the military who has not been identified publicly, or whether they have opened an investigation into a former boss who Brennan said asked her for sex but was promoted instead of reprimanded. A senior defense source told us police are expected to open additional investigations. There are questions about why the Liberal government didn't do more. Today at the committee hearings into the allegations against Vance, lawyer Michel Drapeau disputed Defense Minister Harjit Sajjan's claim that there was nothing more he could have done.
He had, in fact, the duty and the facility, if he wanted to have the matter investigated. He could have appointed one of the military judge as a board of inquiry and get to the bottom of it and then act on it.
The committee has now summoned Gary Walburn, the former military ombudsman who warned Sajjan about the allegations against Vance in 2018. Vance has denied all allegations of inappropriate behaviour. Donna?
Okay, Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks. The House of Commons has voted to declare what's happening to the minority Muslim Uighur population in China a genocide. The motion was put forward by the Conservatives, who called on the Liberals to send a united message about human rights. No MPs voted against it, but not everyone voted for it. The case in Canada's relationship with China is complicated. Abigail Bimman is following the developments. Abigail, how did today's vote unfold?
Well, Donna, the motion passed late this afternoon. MPs voted in favor 266 to 0. That means more than 70 people abstained from voting, including the Prime Minister, who wasn't there, and the entire Liberal cabinet. Many Liberal backbenchers did vote in favor. And an amendment put forward by the Bloc Québécois also passed, calling on the International Olympic Committee to move the 2022 Beijing Olympics if China doesn't change its practices.
They were torturing, beating them, insulting them, making them crawl like dogs, and not hesitating killing them too.
Speaking through an interpreter, Kalbiner Tursun says she is a concentration camp witness. A lucky one who got out, she says, with relatives still in Uyghur detention camps in China.
In 2019, as any other Uyghur women, I was forcibly sterilized. After waiting in line for 4 hours, my turn, I have become permanently handicapped. I would not forget this painful experience forever. Several hundred Uyghur women became sterile at the same time with me. As I speak right now, I am feeling the post-surgical pain in my body.
We can no longer ignore this. We must call it for what it is, a genocide.
MPs were asked if they were concerned the two Canadians detained by China, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, could become collateral damage.
If we allow arbitrary detention to deter genocide recognition, then no Canadian is safe, no Canadian abroad.
Ahead of the vote, the Chinese embassy in Ottawa expressed its strong dissatisfaction and firm opposition in a statement, saying the claims against them are disinformation and lies, and there is no so-called genocide, forced sterilization, forced labor, or re-education camps.
They have no alternative to denying what is going on, because admission would just make things worse on their end. However, unfortunately, we have a lot of evidence, mounting witness evidence, camp survivors and others.
The timing of this vote is significant. It comes on the eve of the first bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Joe Biden. Trudeau and Biden will meet virtually Tuesday afternoon. Members of their cabinet will too. A Canadian government source tells Global News the cases of Kovrig and Spavor, as well as Meng Wanzhou, are expected to come up, but as part of a broader conversation around China and human rights. Donna?
Important conversation. Abigail Bimman in Ottawa, thanks. They perform pivotal work, but barely make ends meet. Coming up, the struggle of workers responsible for critical water infrastructure on First Nations. Plus, can they stay secret? The U.S. Supreme Court rules on former President Trump's tax returns. Tonight, we take a deeper look at the water crisis affecting First Nations across this country. The workers responsible for maintaining critical infrastructure are often low paid and are on call 24/7. A year-long investigation led by Global News, APTN, Concordia's Institute for Investigative Journalism, discovered how outdated funding structures have led to a cascade of problems. Here's Elizabeth McSheffrey.
We'll fill this up.
When something goes wrong at Tobic First Nation's aging water treatment plant, Greg Brewer's phone is often the first to ring.
It's satisfying. It's tiring at sometimes because you're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long.
Brewer is part of the last line of defense for a system that delivers water to 2,500 residents, and yet he makes less than $20 an hour.
It's stressful. But, I mean, I guess like anything else, if you do it long enough, you get used to it. And you just live your life with it.
Global News, APTN, the Institute for Investigative Journalism, and journalism students across the country surveyed 122 First Nations from coast to coast. We found 2/3 of their water operators earn less than the median wage of other operators in their province. Some earn less than half that wage, and some earn close to minimum wage.
We sacrifice our salaries to pay for our third operator, so it doesn't really add to too much. It's more of a favor.
Here in the Maritimes, we spoke with operators who work full-time on call around the clock for as little as $13 an hour. First Nations say there just isn't enough funding to go around, meaning tough decisions need to be made on how the money is spent.
Our own source revenue is taking a hit this year. So for that, we have to pick and choose. It's overwhelming, I guess, like to think that something should be more simple and it's not.
The federal government hasn't updated its funding formula for water and wastewater treatment needs in 23 years.
The situation they find themselves in is unacceptable. This is perhaps the more important discussion around sovereignty over critical infrastructure.
While additional funding is on the way, some are pursuing a new solution on the East Coast.
But certainly the theme of water is fundamental to First Nations, and they felt it was time to get beyond the year-to-year kind of focus of trying to operate a system and take a more long-term approach.
Last year, the Atlantic First Nations Water Authority signed a historic framework that will finally allow its members to control their own infrastructure. The plan is to be up and running by 2022, setting an example that could be adopted anywhere in Canada. Elizabeth McSheffrey, Global News, Halifax.
Still ahead, a pair of frightening aviation incidents and the company linked to both.
Mayday, Mayday, United 28.
Another Boeing plane, this time the 777, has been grounded after this catastrophic engine failure on a United Airlines flight shortly after takeoff from Denver on Saturday. The flight landed safely. U.S. regulators have issued an airworthiness directive for stepped-up inspections of the hollow fan blades unique to the Boeing 777's Pratt & Whitney engine. Initial findings show 2 fan blades fractured, causing the engine to blow up. In the Netherlands, an engine on a Boeing 747 caught fire shortly after takeoff. 2 people on the ground were injured by metal parts that fell from the cargo plane. Several cars and homes were also damaged. The 747 was en route to New York City when it happened. It was rerouted and made a safe landing in Belgium. The cause is under investigation. The U.S. Supreme Court has declined to block a grand jury from getting former President Donald Trump's personal and corporate tax returns. His tax returns are still subject to secrecy rules and won't be made public at this point, but they could be if the Manhattan District Attorney brings criminal charges at some future date and seeks to introduce them as evidence. Trump has tried to shield his taxes since the 2016 election campaign. Up next, Nova Scotia's game plan for community vaccination. Nova Scotia has endured a year of tragedy, all under the cloud of COVID-19. One bright spot is how the province has kept its infection numbers lower than much of the country. As Ross Lord tells us, that's made for a more laid-back atmosphere as the province begins its community vaccination program, starting with seniors.
Like most elderly Canadians, Bernice Burns hasn't been getting out much in the past year.
I do go and get my own groceries. I don't stay in the store very long because I'm a bit afraid at my age of, maybe picking something up.
On this outing, Burns is picking up something inspirational. The first of 2 doses of vaccine at a community vaccine clinic for residents aged 80 and older.
It's nothing to it. It's just a little prick in the arm, and I'm sure I'm going to be all right.
In a province that's avoided major outbreaks since last spring, this clinic is a chance to learn the best way to vaccinate people en masse in a less stressful atmosphere. In coming weeks, more community clinics will open. After ages 80 and over are immunized, clinics will target younger residents, moving down by 5-year increments at a time.
A measured approach of rolling out vaccine, knowing that we don't have the same type of pressure to immunize as quickly as possible as other provinces.
For those on the receiving end, the needles are liberating.
It's a Christmas gift that doesn't have to be wrapped.
Mary Poole says since last March, she's ventured out of her apartment only 10 times. Armed with newfound security, she's eager to get moving.
A better chance of living an extra year. To get out around. I might be out dancing again if things get better.
Hope that the year ahead will be an improvement. Ross Lord, Global News.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with some stunning new video and audio from NASA's Perseverance rover.
Perseverance is now slowed to subsonic speeds, and the heat chill has been separated.
This camera gives you a front row seat as the rover hurtled to the surface of Mars last week. It entered the upper atmosphere at 20,100 kilometers an hour. And Perseverance is also lending us its ears. NASA says a microphone picked up that. It's a faint wind gust, they say, on Mars, and they say it's the first ever sound recording from Mars. NASA says it wanted to take the public along for the ride of a lifetime. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.